Have you ever had the strange feeling that you already knew what someone was about to do before they did it, before they spoke, before they acted, but you ignored it because you couldn't explain why? What if the problem was never that you didn't know, but that no one ever taught you how to read what you were already seeing? Most people walk through life believing human beings are complicated, mysterious, impossible to understand, but that's not entirely true. People are not unreadable. They are patterned. And once you learn to recognize those patterns, something unsettling happens. The world starts making sense in ways you didn't expect. Faces feel louder, silences feel heavier, reactions start telling stories words never could. Let me introduce you to someone who didn't know any of this yet. His name was Elias. Elias was the kind of person people trusted instinctively, not because he was charismatic or dominant, but because he listened. He was quiet in a way that felt safe, present without trying to be impressive. Friends would say things to him they never planned to say out loud. Co-workers would linger in doorways halfway through a confession before they realized what they were doing. He never interrupted, never rushed, never pushed. And because of that, people filled the space with themselves. But here's the truth Elias never admitted to anyone. He wasn't listening out of kindness. He was listening because he was afraid to speak. From a young age, Elias learned that attention was dangerous. Growing up, he lived in a house where moods shifted without warning, where a single wrong word could turn the air sharp and unbearable. He learned to watch faces closely, to measure tone, to predict emotional weather before the storm hit. Survival depended on anticipation, so he became excellent at it. By the time he was an adult, this skill no longer felt like fear. It felt like intuition. He could sense when a conversation was about to turn. He noticed how certain people leaned back when they felt threatened, how others leaned forward when they wanted control. He saw how smiles didn't always reach the eyes, how laughter sometimes arrived too fast, like a shield raised before an attack. He noticed patterns, but he didn't name them. He didn't understand them. He just felt them. And yet, despite seeing so much in others, Elias felt invisible to himself. He struggled in relationships not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much in the wrong direction. He gave people understanding instead of boundaries, compassion instead of clarity. He explained away behavior that hurt him because he could see where it came from. He told himself stories like, they didn't mean it, or they're just going through something, or I know why they're like this. And he did know, but knowing why someone hurts you doesn't stop it from hurting. There was one relationship in particular that finally forced him to confront this. Her name was Mira. She was confident in the way people admire instantly. Sharp, articulate, socially magnetic. She spoke with certainty, laughed loudly, and never seemed unsure of herself. Around her, Elias felt smaller, quieter, like a background character in his own life. At first, he mistook that feeling for attraction. Mira praised his calmness, said she liked how grounded he was, how he didn't need attention. And Elias believed her. He believed that being unseen was the same as being appreciated. But slowly patterns emerged. Mira interrupted him often, dismissed his concerns as overthinking, framed her decisions as logic and his reactions as emotion, and every time Elias tried to explain how something made him feel, she turned it into a debate he could never win. He noticed the tension in her voice when he asked certain questions, the way her tone hardened when he challenged her certainty, the way she laughed things off that deserved seriousness. But instead of trusting what he saw, Elias trusted what she said. I'm just being honest. You're too sensitive. This is just how I am. So he adapted. He became quieter, more accommodating. He told himself he was being mature. Until one night, during a conversation that felt small on the surface, something in him shifted. They were talking about childhood. Mira spoke confidently about hers, framing every hardship as something she had outgrown. When Elias gently asked how those experiences still affected her, the room changed. Her posture stiffened, her voice sharpened. She deflected with humor, then irritation, and finally she said, "Why do you always psychoanalyze things? Not everything has to be that deep." The words weren't cruel, but the reaction was telling. For the first time, Elias didn't ignore it. He didn't explain it away. He noticed the discomfort, the sudden defensiveness, the mask slipping for just a moment, and in that moment, he saw something clearer than he ever had before. Not confidence, but fear. Not strength, but avoidance. not certainty, but a carefully maintained performance. And then a more uncomfortable realization followed. He had seen this pattern before, not just in her but in others, and not just in others but in himself. Elias realized that his silence wasn't wisdom, it was protection. That his ability to read people came from years of learning how not to provoke danger. That his empathy, while real, was also a shield that kept him from being truly seen. He wasn't just understanding others, he was disappearing inside that understanding. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had never dared to ask before: if I can see the masks everyone else is wearing. What mask am I wearing to survive? That question didn't have an easy answer. But it marked the beginning of something irreversible, because once you start seeing patterns, you can't unsee them. And once you see your own, you can no longer pretend they don't exist. What if the traits you pride yourself on are not just strengths, but adaptations? And what if the way you read others is quietly revealing the parts of yourself you've been hiding? That question is where the real work begins. And it's where we begin now. Most of us are trained from a very young age to trust words. Language is treated as truth. If someone says they're fine, we accept it. If someone claims confidence, we assume it's real. If someone explains their behavior convincingly enough, we stop questioning it. But long before modern psychology, thinkers like Nietzsche warned us that language is not a mirror of truth. It's a tool, often used not to reveal reality, but to protect us from it. People rarely speak from pure honesty. They speak from survival, from ego, from fear, from the need to maintain an identity that feels safe. What you encounter when you meet someone is not their essence. It's their armor, a carefully constructed version of themselves designed to function in the world without falling apart. The person who appears endlessly kind may not be kind at all. They may be terrified of conflict. The one who presents as invulnerable may be holding themselves together through sheer force of will. And the most deceptive part is this: most people don't know they're doing it. They are not consciously lying, they are unconsciously defending. Nietzsche once suggested that every profound spirit wears a mask, not as an insult, but as a warning. If you mistake the mask for the person, you will misunderstand everything that follows. The truth is, people leak who they are constantly. Not through what they say, but through the cracks in how they say it. The hesitation before answering, the sudden shift in tone, the exaggerated laugh, the quick change of subject when the conversation gets too close to something tender. These moments are not accidents, they are signals. The first psychological truth you must understand is this: everyone wears a mask to survive, not because they are false, but because they are afraid. Society rewards certain traits and punishes others. Over time, people learn which parts of themselves are acceptable and which are dangerous. The mask becomes a compromise between who they are and who they believe they must be to belong, but masks are not seamless, they strain under pressure, and the first place truth appears is in discomfort. Watch what unsettles someone, watch what makes them defensive, dismissive, or tense. That is where the real person begins to surface. The second truth is sharper and harder to accept. What someone hates most in others is often what they are hiding from themselves. This is projection, but not in the casual way it's often described. It's not just insecurity, it's self-rejection externalized. When someone obsessively criticizes arrogance, it often masks a deep fear of insignificance. When someone fixates on dishonesty, it's frequently because there's a truth they cannot face within themselves. Nietzsche understood that judgment is rarely about morality, it's about self-preservation. We attack in others what threatens the story we tell ourselves. So if you want to read someone, don't only observe what they admire, observe what they condemn, and ask why that particular trait provokes such intensity. The third truth is one most people overlook because it's uncomfortable. Silence reveals more than words ever could. Nietzsche distrusted language because he saw how easily it could be used to avoid reality. Silence, on the other hand, is harder to control. When someone pauses before answering a simple question, when they offer rehearsed responses to emotionally loaded topics, when they deflect instead of engaging. That absence of sound is not emptiness, it's information. Avoidance is not neutral, it is directional. It points directly toward fear. The fourth truth is one that challenges our assumptions about goodness. Excessive virtue is often disguised vanity. Be cautious of those who constantly announce their morality, who correct others publicly, who need to be seen as righteous. Nietzsche saw this as a subtle form of dominance. morality used as a pedestal. The louder the performance of virtue, the more likely it is compensating for something unresolved. True integrity does not require witnesses. The fifth truth shifts how you interpret deception entirely. People don't lie to you first. They lie to themselves. When someone says, "I'm fine," or "I don't care," or "I'm over it," they are often repeating a script they've practiced for years. These are not lies meant to manipulate you. They are lies meant to allow them to function. Nietzsche saw self-deception not as malice, but as necessity. A way to keep moving in a world that asks too much. And this is where reading people becomes possible. Because lies told to oneself are never perfectly consistent. The contradictions reveal the truth. The sixth truth is one of Nietzsche's most piercing observations. Where someone feels superior, they are often hiding inferiority. Excessive pride is rarely confidence. It is overcompensation. Those who constantly remind others of their achievements are often trying to convince themselves. Those who diminish others casually are usually afraid of being diminished. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need comparison. It doesn't need an audience. And once you understand this, reading people stops feeling like judgment and starts feeling like clarity. You realize that interruptions are not always arrogance. They are often fear of being forgotten. That constant displays of happiness can be a signal of loneliness. That bodies often contradict sentences. And with that clarity comes responsibility. Because seeing clearly gives you a choice. You can use it to manipulate, to dominate, to stay ahead. Or you can use it to understand, to soften, to connect. Nietzsche did not want you to see through people to control them. He wanted you to see through them so you would stop being fooled by appearances and start engaging with what's real. And now that you've started to see the cracks, the real question is this: what will you do with what you can no longer unsee? Once you begin to notice the cracks, something subtle but irreversible happens. You stop reacting to people the way you used to. Their words lose some of their power. Their tone starts to matter more than their arguments. Their behavior stops feeling random and starts feeling patterned. And slowly, almost quietly, you realize that people aren't confusing at all. They're consistent. Painfully so. Nietzsche believed that the self is not a fixed object, it's a performance shaped by pressure, a role assembled from what worked, what didn't, and what hurt too much to repeat. And when that role is challenged, even gently, the performance falters. That's when the truth leaks out. This is where we go deeper. Most people believe they act from desire. They'll tell you they want success, love, freedom, peace. But Nietzsche saw something more uncomfortable beneath the surface. Most human behavior is not driven by what we want to gain, but by what we're afraid to lose. Status, control, belonging, identity, safety. This brings us to the seventh truth. Most actions are driven by unconscious fear. Watch how people behave when they feel exposed. Notice who over-explains, who dominates conversations, who disappears entirely when things get personal. These are not personality quirks. They are protective strategies. Someone who constantly says yes may be terrified of abandonment. Someone who always needs to be right may fear being seen as insignificant. Someone who avoids commitment may fear being known too deeply. If you want to read someone, stop listening to what they say they want. Instead, ask yourself what they seem to be protecting. What would hurt them the most to lose? That fear shapes their behavior far more than any stated goal. The eighth truth builds directly on this. When someone criticizes excessively, they are revealing themselves. Nietzsche understood that judgment is rarely outward-facing. It's inward tension redirected. The person who mocks emotional vulnerability is often terrified of their own feelings. The one who fixates on others' flaws may be locked in a private war with themselves. Criticism is not neutral observation, it's displacement. So the next time someone repeatedly attacks a specific trait in others, don't get distracted by the target. Trace the criticism backward. Ask yourself what that trait threatens inside them. Projection is not just a defense mechanism, it's a confession disguised as commentary. The ninth truth is one many people mistake for strength. False confidence often hides unresolved guilt. There's a particular kind of certainty that feels rigid, loud, unyielding. It doesn't invite dialogue. It shuts it down. Nietzsche noticed this especially in authority figures, moral leaders, and those who perform certainty as identity. This kind of confidence is not peace, it's armor. When someone cannot tolerate being questioned, when they react defensively to curiosity, when their certainty feels rehearsed rather than grounded, look for the guilt underneath. Not always moral guilt, sometimes existential guilt, regret, shame, a version of themselves they're trying to outrun. Real inner peace doesn't need to convince anyone. The 10th truth is subtle, but once you notice it, it becomes impossible to ignore. People betray their inner truth through exaggeration. Absolute statements are rarely true. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm always happy. That never affects me. Exaggeration is emotional noise. Its volume turned up to drown out doubt. Nietzsche believed that extremism of any kind often signals imbalance, not conviction. So when someone speaks in extremes, don't focus on the words. Listen to the intensity. Ask what they are trying to silence. Exaggeration is rarely confidence, it's anxiety with a megaphone. The 11th truth reveals something many people misunderstand about power. The need for control often masks inner chaos. Some people crave structure to an obsessive degree. They micromanage, dominate conversations, resist change, and struggle to trust others. From the outside, it can look like strength. But Nietzsche saw it differently. He believed that when the inner world feels unstable, the outer world must be tightly managed. Control is not always about authority. Sometimes it's about fear. Fear that if things loosen even slightly, everything will collapse. So instead of fearing controlling people, learn to read them. Their rigidity is a signal. The stricter the shell, the more fragile the interior. The 12th truth feels especially relevant now. The louder the performance, the emptier the core. Nietzsche would have recognized modern life immediately, the constant broadcasting, the curated identities, the relentless need to be seen. He didn't interpret this as confidence, he saw it as desperation. When someone cannot sit quietly with themselves, they fill the silence with performance. Attention becomes a substitute for self-connection. Validation becomes nourishment. But the person who truly knows themselves doesn't need an audience. They are already at home within their own skin. So when someone's life feels like a stage, don't envy them. Understand them. Performance is often a whisper of unmet need. By now you may feel a shift in how you see people. Patterns start to speak louder than promises. You notice the interruption, the boast, the avoidance, and you no longer take it personally. You read it, and that changes how it lands. You realize you're not decoding minds. You're recognizing defenses, and with that recognition comes a quiet power. Not the power to dominate, but the power to remain steady, to stop reacting blindly, to respond with clarity instead of confusion. This is a good moment to pause and notice something important. If you're still here, still listening closely, it's probably because part of you recognizes these patterns not just in others, but in yourself. If that's true, stay with this. Let it unfold fully, because now we reach the deepest layer. Nietzsche believed that beneath every behavior is a belief, and beneath every belief is a wound. This final set of truths is not about surface patterns, it's about origins, about the hidden stories people carry into every room without realizing it. The 13th truth changes how you hear everything. No one speaks from logic, they speak from pain. People like to believe they are rational, that their opinions are formed through careful thought and objective reasoning. But Nietzsche disagreed. He believed that most beliefs are emotional conclusions later justified with logic. Someone may say they don't believe in love, but listen carefully, that's not philosophy, that's protection. Worldviews are often scars dressed as ideas. When you want to understand someone's beliefs, don't debate them. Ask what hurt them, ask what they are trying to avoid feeling again. Suddenly, arguments lose their hostility. You stop reacting and start seeing. The 14th truth reveals real character. How someone responds to weakness reveals their inner strength. Watch how people treat those who cannot offer them anything, those with less power, less status, less protection. Nietzsche believed that true strength is not proven through domination, but through restraint. A person who mocks vulnerability is usually running from their own. A person who punishes mistakes harshly was likely never allowed to make any. But the one who can sit with weakness without contempt, who can offer compassion without superiority, who can witness pain without needing to fix or flee, that person has already won a battle most never fight. The 15th truth explains a behavior many mistake for ego. When someone fears being forgotten, they chase attention. There is a hunger that doesn't come from vanity, but from neglect. The need to be seen, to be remembered, to leave an imprint. Nietzsche understood this deeply. The child who was overlooked becomes the adult who cannot tolerate invisibility. So they create noise, drama, presence. Attention seeking is often grief in disguise, a response to a silence that once hurt too much. When you see someone who feels like too much, pause before judging. Ask what would happen if they were suddenly unseen. The 16th truth is one of the hardest to accept. People often attack what they secretly envy. Nietzsche saw envy not as cruelty, but as unexpressed longing. Criticism becomes a way to destroy what we cannot allow ourselves to desire. The person who mocks confidence may wish they had it. The one who tears down freedom may feel trapped. Envy is not hatred. It's admiration twisted by shame. And once you understand this, insults lose their sting. You see them for what they are. Grief over an unlived life. The 17th truth pulls everything together. People don't act from belief, they act from biography. We like to think we've outgrown our past, that we are guided by principles and values. But Nietzsche believed most people are reenacting early roles. The one who was never heard becomes someone who talks over others. The one punished for emotion becomes detached. The one who had to earn love becomes addicted to approval. Behavior is history repeating itself in the present. And when you learn to read that history, people become understandable instead of unpredictable. The 18th and final truth is the quietest, but the most powerful. Patterns are confessions if you know how to listen. People may not tell you where they were hurt, but they will show you. Repeated avoidance, chronic overworking, serial detachment, these are not random habits. They are protection strategies, silent admissions of fear. Nietzsche believed that once you learn to read patterns instead of words, something profound happens. You stop personalizing behavior. You stop judging reflexively. You start seeing the human behind the strategy. And that changes you. You become harder to manipulate, but softer toward pain. You see the child behind the critic, the fear behind the bully, the wound behind the mask, and instead of reacting, you remain grounded. You don't become naive, you become clear. Take a moment now, think about the people in your life, the ones who confuse you, the ones who frustrate you, the ones who pull you close and push you away. What patterns do you see now that you didn't see before? And then ask the harder question, what patterns do you recognize in yourself? Because this was never just about understanding others, it was about remembering yourself. The defenses you learned, the roles you adopted, the masks you still wear when you feel unsafe. Nietzsche didn't want you to become a spectator of human behavior. He wanted you to awaken, to realize that everything you judge in others is something you carry, that everything you admire is something you long to embody. Seeing clearly is not the end, it's the beginning, and once you see, you can no longer pretend you don't.